Why is it that when you walk into almost any supermarket or a small retail shop in Uganda, the soft drinks options are usually Coca-Cola, Pepsi, RC Cola. Whether you're in Kampala, Mbarara, or a trading center in eastern Uganda or western, or whichever part of Uganda you are in, you will likely see Coca-Cola or Pepsi branded refrigerators at the entrance. Okay. The same brands dominate shelf space across the country. This pattern is not really random. It reflects the underlying economic structure of this industry, specifically an oligopolistic market structure. Hello, my name is Precious Josephina Dikane, and in this presentation, I will analyze the Ugandan soft drinks industry using market structure theory from economics and business landscape course that I'm doing right now. And the objective of this is not only to classify the market structure, but also to explain how that structure influences competition. How does it influence pricing behavior? How does it influence the business strategy and the regulatory considerations within Uganda's economy? Before identifying the structure of the industry, it is important for us to understand or to define what the market structure is. For us to understand what exactly is a market structure. So, market structure refers to the organization of an industry based on the number of farms, the type of products they sell, okay, the ease of entry and exit, and lastly, the degree of market power or the market share, in short. It determines how firms behave and how prices are formed. Now, according to Gregory Mankey, there are four main market structures or four different categories of market structure. One is the perfect competition. So, perfect competition consists of many firms or many small firms selling identical products, such as farmers selling tomatoes in a local market where no single seller can influence price. So when you go to the market and you see there are different types of tomato sellers, their pricings are different. Okay. So in short, there are many farms, many small farms, they sell identical products and they are price takers, meaning, they have no power over the price or they can't control the price. Second, we have the monopolistic competition. This involves many firms selling differentiated products and they have some price control. For example, as restaurants are offering different menus and branding. So this is monopolistic, right? The product, there are very many farms, there are very many restaurants, there are very many food courts, food eateries, fast food places. But they're offering differentiated products. They're offering different menus and different branding. So how they could be, they're all in the food industry, yes. But there's one that could be doing Indian food. There's one that could be doing Western, all these different types of menus that are present. So that is monopolistic competition. Then we have oligopoly, which is dominated by a few large firms whose decisions affect one another. So that is strategic interdependence. So when an example of this oligopoly kind of market structure is actually the industry chosen for this presentation today, which is the soft drinks industry. So we see few dominant firms or few big large firms, for example, the Coca-Cola industry, the Crown Beverages, the Harris International. Those are big firms, but their decisions depend or will affect the other decision, for example. It's the same with telecommunication. So for Uganda, it is usually MTN, Airtel. So those are two dominant firms, and they're few in number, so 2 to 3 relatively. Okay. So for telecommunication, there's MTN and Airtel. So the decisions that MTN makes will affect, or affect how Airtel also makes their decisions, because they would want to stay relevant in the market. The last but not least is the monopoly, where this is when one firm controls the entire market, such as single national electricity provider. For Uganda, it's Umeme. So in this case, Umeme controls, it's one single firm and it has the full control of the market. So there is no other electricity, firm that comes into the market, that comes into play. Okay, using this framework, okay, I can now apply this exact framework, this exact knowledge that we've understood to Uganda's soft drinks industry. A few characteristics of an oligopolistic market, or characteristics of oligopoly. Okay, so oligopoly has 4 defining characteristics. These are a small number of dominant firms, so few dominant firms are present in this industry. There is a high barrier of entry, so it's hard to enter, but easy to get out. Okay. And there is product differentiation, so meaning the products can differ, but generally the price remains a little bit relatively constant. Then the last is the strategic interdependence, which means firms must consider how competitors will respond before making a decision. So before, let me say, MTN makes that decision to maybe come up with a new bundle or to come up with a new package, they will have already anticipated what, let me say, what would Airtel's response be, and if their response would be better or not, how they can counterattack that response like that. So this lets us now examine how each of these applies in the case of Uganda's soft drinks industry. So the industry overview is that the soft drinks industry market is primarily dominated by 2 to 3 industries, or 2 to 3 brands, let's say. One of them is Coca-Cola. So the Coca-Cola Beverages Uganda. The second would be Crown Beverages Limited, and the third is Harris International Limited. So for this, we talk of nationwide production and distribution. Okay, examples of this is Coca-Cola produces beverages, right? We have heard of the Coke, the famous Coke. Then there is Fanta, there is Sprite. That's all under Coca-Cola beverages. Then we have Crown Beverages, which is Pepsi, Mirinda. That is basically, Crown Beverages. Then we have Harris International that produces RC Cola and other, related energy drinks. Although smaller beverage producers exist in the same market, the majority of the branded carbonated drinks that we see, that is sold, that we see and that we drink, is mainly concentrated around these 3 firms. Okay, so that means there's a high market concentration of the 3 dominant firms, and they have strong brand dominance. So that's what I mean when you go to a supermarket, when you go to this, to your rural areas, and you go to the trading center, you'll always see Coca-Cola brands. You'll always see a refrigerator with Coca-Cola. So they're showing their visibility, meaning they have a strong hold on the market. This high concentration ratio is a key indicator of an oligopolistic market. Okay. Now, why do I say that the market is oligopolistic? Why aren't we saying it is perfect competition, or why not monopoly? Why not monopolistic competition? The reasons are that it cannot be a perfect competition because, as I've said, they are interdependent. So the decisions they make, they have control over the decision. They have control over the prices. So they are price makers. So they can adjust their prices. When we look at perfect competition, we said they are price takers, not makers. So they take on different prices. You'll see a lot of variation in the prices. While in the oligopoly side, there is not that much of a variation. They have to be within a certain range. Okay. Then there's a high barrier of entry. When we see for perfect competition, well, let's talk about farmers who are dealing in, let me say, tomatoes. It is easier for them to get into that market because very many people want the tomatoes. Plus, tomatoes are not really that much branded. You can grow them, sell them as easily as possible. But if we're talking of soft drinks, the barriers of entry are high. Okay, and we shall get into the different kinds of barriers of entry. But when you want to open up this soft drink industry, if you want to join the soft drink industry, there are a lot of things that you have to consider, and some of these barriers are too high that not every farm can come in as easily as possible. That's why we see these three farms that have stayed longer and that have dominated this market. Then it cannot also be monopoly because monopoly needs one big farm. For example, Umeme in Uganda that controls the whole of electricity. So they have the full control over the price, they have the full control over the market. While in terms of the soft drinks industry, most people would say they want Coca-Cola, Crown beverages. Others would say they want the Coca-Cola beverages. It depends on the preference, but it would always be around, it would rotate around those two or three brands. Okay. So it can't really be monopolist. It can't be a monopoly. Then we got to not monopolistic competition. So few farms control majority of the output. So here we're saying few farms control the majority of the output, which means it's oligopolistic. As I've said, it's two or three, right? When we see in monopolistic competition, the slide that I showed before, that monopolistic competition, one of its characteristics is many farms, okay, differentiated products, some price control. But oligopoly has few dominant farms. Okay, so there is the dominant aspect in it. So those that have more market share. Okay. But for monopolistic, many farms, there are very many, they have different types. The restaurants are many. Okay. We're not going to see one dominant restaurant because we all have different types and preferences when it comes to food. They have different menus. So they are not easily comparable. Okay. Yeah, so with all that put in mind, with all these examples that we have, this shows that the soft drinks industry, therefore, is oligopolistic. It is there are few dominant farms, you know, it's more than one. They are price makers. There's a high entry barrier. You know, the distribution is, they're strategically dependent. Those are all characteristics of an oligopolistic market. So we look at the number and size of these farms. Okay. So the indicators of oligopoly is that only a few firms control most of the market output. So 2 to 3 firms dominate market output. Okay. By output, I mean the products that are released to the market, or the products that are in the market. Example, for example, the soft drinks. The soft drinks that are in the market are mainly from these 2 to 3 firms. Okay, so they dominate. They have the largest share. When you walk into the store, when you check the shelves, you find more of these products than compared to the other smaller brands that are present. So in Uganda, Coca-Cola and Pepsi products are available in nearly every supermarket, fuel station, and small shops. This is what I mean by the scale, the ability to reach, the high concentration ratio. When you go to the nearest shop near you, you'll be able to find that Coca-Cola drink. You'll be able to find a Pepsi drink. You'd be able to find, because the concentration is so high, and they have distributed to every part of the country that it's easier for you to access. Okay, that shows that the number and the size of this farm is large. Okay, then their large-scale bottling plants and national distribution systems allows them to supply both urban and rural markets efficiently. So that's why I say when you go, even if you're in a rural area, you'd still be able to find a soft drink. You'd still be able to find Coca-Cola. It may not be in a big shop. It could be in, those small kiosks we have near you. Yeah, so you would always still find Coca-Cola. You'd still, if you're craving, a soft drink, you'll be able to find Coca-Cola, you'd be able to find Pepsi, the Fantas. So it would be easier. As we see, for example, the image, it's not visibly clear, but yes, so you can see that there's this whole line of Coca-Cola products here, the Zero, Sprite, the Fanta. That is what I mean by the distribution networks and the concentration. Okay. This scale gives them significant market power and influence over pricing strategies. We shall look at the pricing strategy as well, but the fact that they are everywhere and they have this market share, that shows that they have the market power. They dominate most of the market. Okay, so they easily have influence on the prices set. They set the prices and they have those pricing strategies. We now check the barriers of entry. As I said before, would have to talk about the barriers of entry because this is a characteristic of an oligopolistic market. So barriers to entry in this industry are substantial. Okay. So first we have the capital requirements, which is the high capital investment. So capital requirements are very high, meaning establishing, let me say, a bottling plant requires significant investment in the machinery, in the production lines, in the quality control systems, because this is you're producing in bulk. You're not producing one item per no for per request. No, this is a bulk production. So the quality has to be consistent. You're not going to have one that has no sugar and another one that doesn't in the same batch, which is supposed to be, which is not the non-sugar related. Even though it's, let me say, the diabetic one, if they are meant to have less sugar, okay, they would have to have less sugar. So meaning there is no way that there will be one which has more sugar in the less sugars. That is quality control. So you'd have to invest in your quality control to make sure that everything is to standard. It's to the standards of the company. The product lines, how do you move from one to another? How is the product made? Okay. What does what? Who does what? The product lines, the machinery and investment. So the machine that's used to put the caps on the bottles, let's say, to fill the cans of the sodas. Yes, so those machines. Then the distribution vehicles. Okay, the lorries, the trucks that we see branded with the Coca-Cola, the Pepsis, the Pepsi names that distribute these different products from urban areas to the rural areas, like mass distribution. Secondly, we look at the access to key inputs such as the sugar and carbon dioxide must be secured through reliable supply contracts. Okay, so this is high because there are not a lot of these supply contracts. These suppliers who can give you, sugar and carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, so as you can make the drinks. Okay, the CO2. Okay, so you need to have access to this in order for you to get into this industry, so as you don't have bottlenecks within your production. Okay, so bottlenecks in the production line, which cause issues and then delays and that sort of thing. So you need to have access to this sugar, to the carbon dioxide, so as you can make the sodas and the process can be smoother. Thirdly, it's the strong brand loyalty. So strong brand loyalty makes it difficult for new entrants to convince consumers to switch. If a new brand, for example, of soda came in right now and they claim to be better than Coca-Cola or Pepsi or RC Cola, it would be hard for them to convince any of the buyers, any of these, of the consumers that their products are better, unless unless they are better, well, more renowned and have more brand loyalty than Coca-Cola, Pepsi, or RC Cola. But that is hard. So in order for them to make the consumers switch, it is very difficult. This becomes a barrier. This becomes a hindrance. It's a blockage to the existence of this kind of company that wants to enter into this market. Finally, many retail outlets use branded refrigerators supplied by dominant firms, limiting display opportunities for new competitors. So when I was saying that you walk into a supermarket and you see an aisle or you see a fridge or you see a banner, as in you're seeing the visibility of these dominant brands is everywhere. That if you're a new firm and you wanted to get into this and you wanted to get, visibility, it is quite hard. For example, the shelf space. To convince a supermarket that you need bigger shelf space would take you a lot of money, maybe say you take a lot of resources, because the supermarkets believe that these dominant firms have more power. They know them, they trust them. Okay, they have built this loyalty, and so these branded refrigerators further enhance. They reinforce this power dynamic. Now, as a new entrant, it is hard to shift that power dynamic from the dominant firms to you. It's hard to switch, people to look at your product and think of, let me switch. I am comfortable with this new brand of soft drinks. It is kind of hard. These structural barriers discourage entry. Okay, so it makes the entry difficult into this market, and it protects the existing firms. So meaning it protects the incumbents. The incumbents here are the already big three, let's say, or the big two. That is the Coca-Colas, the Pepsi, the ones who have the dominant share. Okay, in this case, if it is the case of telecom, then that would be the Airtel, the MTN. It would be hard for people to get into the industry and stay within the industry because of these, barriers of entry. But for the people already there who have already made a name for themselves, it would protect them because they have already made that name. They're already as popular as possible. They're already widely known. So it's easier for them to get more consumers. We'll look at how they differentiate their products now. So although soft drinks perform similarly in this case, They perform similar functions. Farms differentiate through other ways, other means. Basically, here I've listed 5. So one would be the branding. So how do they brand their products? Here we're looking at the Coca-Cola versus Pepsi versus RC Cola. So that would be the first image that I showed that was there of this, right? So the branding, this is basically how they brand themselves. So when you look at something red like this, you're saying, oh, that's Coca-Cola. So that's their whole branding, right? Then the Pepsi, then the RC Cola. So this is how they brand themselves. How do they make themselves look in the market? Okay, so that's a form of product differentiation. That's how they make themselves look different from one another. Okay. Next, we look at the packaging. So how do they package? We have seen from that slide that there were cans. Okay. Now, should they use bottles? Let me say, or should they make them smaller so as they're easy to be carried around, portable more? Should they use glass versus PET bottles? So those are all ways of variations, right? Then we look at the flavor, the different flavors. There is what do we call it? Mirinda fruity, Mirinda orange, Fanta berry. Those are all different flavors that attract the different markets, that make them unique on the market. So that's how they differentiate their products. Then we also see the Coke Zero, then the regular Coke. That is the zero sugar and diet variant. Ones that cater to those who are more health conscious, to those that have healthcare problems that they need to look after, but they still want to have that soft drink. So they differentiate like that. Then we have the fifth one, which is expansion into water and energy drinks. So you see that RC Cola is ventured into energy drinks. There was the Sting variations, the Sting Berry, Sting Golden, something. I forgot the name exactly. But when they came out on the market, they were, everyone's kind of thing. The energy drinks. Later on, we see that Coca-Cola and Pepsi also ventured into energy drinks. They have water as well, Renzori, Aqua, like that. So, for example, Coca-Cola offers Coke Zero, okay? That is for the zero sugar variant. Coke Zero and Fanta variant. So Fanta variants, that I'm still talking of the Fanta berry, the Fanta orange, the Fanta what? Mirinda fruity, those are variants, right? Then Pepsi offers Pepsi Max and other flavored drinks. So variation in flavor, in zero sugar and expansion. Then and the expansion, sorry. Then returnable glass bottles are common in small neighborhood shops, while PET bottles dominate supermarkets. PET bottles is the plastic bottles that can be reusable. Okay. Then the glass ones just are used mainly in the rural areas, so in the like small neighborhood shops, you'll find those glass bottles. But also, recently, you'd also find the PET bottles, because that's the packaging. Then advertising campaigns, sponsorship of sports events, and promotional activities further strengthen brand identity. So how they choose to promote their brands, that is part of branding actually. How they choose to advertise, how do they choose to send out the message? For example, okay, so during the time of Share the Joy, the Coca-Cola thing, how they chose to share it out, how did they choose to advertise that campaign? They chose using bottles that had names on it, which made people more curious to find their names, to find other names, to see names that they had never seen, to see names that were interesting, which, all led to people buying more soft drinks. So this demonstrates that competition is largely non-price based. As I've said, they don't really focus so much on the pricing, because the pricing, if we are looking at the soda, for example, these soft drinks, Usually the price for Coca-Cola is usually the same as the price for a Pepsi. There is not really much of variation. But when you look at the branding, the packaging, the period when they were shared the joy for Coca-Cola, Pepsi didn't have really much, so they hadn't yet responded to that. So many people kept on going for the Coca-Cola purchases. So that is an example of product differentiation. We look at the pricing behavior, how the pricing behavior and the strategic interdependence. So how do they price the things? How do they make these pricing decisions? Now, in oligopolistic markets, firms are strategically interdependent. So they depend on each other. They need to know what your competitor will do and what you should do. So this means that when one firm changes its price, for example, competitors are likely to respond. All right? Because they need to stay relevant as well. They don't want the other party to take more of a share than they already have. So it is more, they have to respond in turn and as fast as possible. A well-known example of this kind of pricing behavior is the 2013 beverage price war. Okay, this is when major firms reduced prices and competitors quickly reacted very fast. They had to react very fast in order to keep up. Yeah, so that was the 2013 price war. However, sustained price wars are rare because they reduce profits for all firms. So, with oligopolistic firms or with the oligopolistic market, these price wars are not really maintained. They are not really an occurrence. They usually are avoided because the more they keep on, having this price war of less, let me say, reducing the price 24/7, it would lead to losses for for all of them, because practically we have that baseline the minimum price that you should be pricing at, and once you're below that minimum price or that minimum cost per unit, it is hard for operations to continue. So if you had a price war on a daily, high possibility is you're going to be making losses. Or if it is increasing the price high and high and higher, that means many people would shift from that to a different, to other drinks that are on the market that are more affordable, for example. So instead, firms rely on short-term promotions, bundle offers, and marketing campaigns. That's why I bring up the share the feeling, the share the feeling by Coke, whereby you had to buy a Coke to gift a friend to share the feeling, which was a big thing. I think it brought for them a lot of profit. That was a very interesting campaign, I understand. And we see that the competitors had to respond to this, and they did. Okay. So those are ways they would rely on those short-term promotions. Okay. Then this behavior aligns with the game theory models, where firms anticipate and respond to competitor strategies, for example. So if a competitor sets this kind of pricing strategy, you would go for the other that makes it, you'd have to respond in turn to that decision that they made. We'll continue on to the strategic interaction and the economies of scale. So large firms benefit from economies of scale. Okay. Obviously, because they're producing in bulk and the cost per unit is reduced. All right. Because they produce in large volumes, their average cost per unit decreases. Okay, so the amount they spend, the cost per product, let me say for one soda, it is reduced because they are producing in bulk. Okay, and they also sell in bulk. So the cost per unit for deliveries, for let me say for distribution is also reduced. For example, large production facilities and nationwide distribution networks allow dominant farms to operate efficiently. So the more production facilities they have, for example, if they have one, let me say, for Uganda, we have one in Namamve for Coca-Cola, right? Also, I think it's also around that side where there is one for Pepsi. So when they have such, it makes it easier for them to distribute the product, so they can easily distribute the goods around the country. It's better than having a farm out of the country and then you have to keep importing the goods, which would be more pricey and more costly. Okay. So smaller farms would struggle to achieve similar cost efficiency, which reinforces the dominance of existing farms. Okay. So because of these economies of scale, the large output lowers average cost, the high fixed costs, the cooler placement strategies, the distribution networks, a smaller farm would find it hard to get the same dominance in this market. We look at the business policy and the implications. So from a business perspective, scale determines survival. Okay, so scale, brand equity, and distribution control are key drivers of competitiveness. So in order to be highly competitive, you need to have scale. Scale, I mean, size, big. Brand equity, you need to have proper brand equity. You need to have innovation projects, so that improves the market share. You need to have a high distribution control. So all these drive competitiveness. They drive relatability, like they make you more visible. Then firms must continuously innovate and maintain strong marketing strategies to retain market share. So that's why we keep seeing the different variations of sodas that keep coming. One time, you see, there was a period we had the Blue Mountain Dew. I've forgotten what it was called. But yes, there was the Blue Mountain Dew that came up, which was new for me. I had never seen, but it was there. So that is an innovation. Or better ways of packaging, for example, or better market strategies like share the feeling, right? That was an innovation that came up, and it took the market by storm. Then from a policy perspective, issues such as sugar taxation, plastic waste regulation, and competition and oversight are important. When you're joining into this market, or when you're looking at the policies, you look at how high is the tax on sugar. What is the regulation against plastic waste bottles? Because remember, they're using PET bottles now. So you need to understand all this. Then there's the need for competition oversight. You need to know what your competitors are doing. That oversight, you shouldn't miss it. While economies of scale may improve productive efficiency, high market concentration may reduce consumer surplus if not properly regulated. Therefore, the oligopolistic structure has both efficiency benefits and potential welfare concerns within Uganda's business landscape. So we're saying that it is good to have the oligopolistic market for the soft drinks, but also it has its ups. There are always ups and downs. It's never a straight line. So you need to weigh your options, and well, that's the industry. That's the soft drinks industry. To conclude, the Ugandan soft drinks industry basically exhibits the defining characteristics of an oligopolistic market. So it shows, from what we have gone through, from the research that I carried out, so as to make this presentation, and from all the knowledge that I have, I believe that the soft drinks industry here is an oligopolistic kind of market. There is a small number of dominant firms. There's a 2 to 3, which is the Coke, the Pepsi, and the RC Cola. There are high barriers of entry that we've already looked at. The product differentiation, how they know according to brand, according to packaging, according to flavors, and the strategic interdependence, whereby there is need to respond to what the competitor has done. Through the application of economic theory and real world examples from Uganda, the industry is best classified as an oligopoly. This structure shapes competition, pricing behavior, business strategy, and regulatory considerations within Uganda's economic environment. So, with that, I conclude this discussion. And thank you for staying around. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your attention. I welcome any questions if you have any. And I just wanted to share this knowledge with all of you. So thank you. And I shall see you in the next one, if possible. Good day, and hope you had a great day. Thank you.